The rancher froze. "Wait, I take it off," she said before it all changed. Sunlight filtered through the tall pine trees at the edge of the property, casting long shadows on the soft, damp ground. Ethan, the rancher, moved carefully among the fences, checking the posts and gates. His hands, strong and calloused from years of work, ran over the rough wood as he inspected each section. It was a routine he had performed countless times, yet every day felt slightly different. The cattle were lowing softly in the distance, a gentle reminder of the life he was responsible for. Ethan had lived on this ranch his entire life. He had inherited it from his father, who had built it with dedication and sweat. Over the years, the ranch had become more than a livelihood. It was a rhythm, a way of life. Ethan woke early every morning, long before the sun rose, to tend to the animals and ensure that everything was in order. He knew the land intimately, every rise and fall of the pastures, every creek that cut across the fields. The ranch was predictable in many ways, but it was also full of surprises, small or large, that reminded him how fragile life could be. On this particular morning, the ranch felt quieter than usual. The usual chatter of birds seemed subdued, and the wind carried a strange stillness that made Ethan pause. He shook his head lightly, dismissing the feeling. Perhaps it was just the early hour, he thought, the world still waking. He had a few hours before the sun climbed high enough to make the day hot and tiring, so he moved toward the barn where the animals were kept. The horses neighed softly as he approached, their breath forming little clouds in the chilly air. As Ethan prepared to check on the feed, he noticed a car pulling up along the gravel road that led to the main house. It was unusual to have visitors at this hour. From the car stepped a woman he did not recognize. She was tall and had a purposeful stride, moving as if she had somewhere important to be, yet there was a softness in her expression that suggested curiosity more than urgency. She carried a small bag, slung casually over one shoulder, and her hair caught the sunlight in a way that made it shimmer. Ethan approached her slowly, wiping his hands on a rag. "Good morning," he said, his voice steady but cautious. Visitors were rare, and he did not like surprises. "Can I help you?" The woman smiled gently. "Good morning, my name is Leela," she said. Her voice was warm, friendly, and had a hint of laughter in it. I'm just visiting for a few days. I've always loved ranch life, and I thought I might get a chance to see it up close." Ethan studied her for a moment. There was something genuine about her, something that made him lower his guard just slightly. "Well, you're here now, I'm Ethan," he replied. "It's not often we get visitors, but you're welcome to stay. The ranch is big, and there's plenty to see." Leela nodded, her eyes scanning the fields and animals. She seemed both excited and a little overwhelmed by the size of the place. "It's beautiful," she said softly. "I've never seen anything like it. It's peaceful." Ethan nodded, feeling a sense of pride. It was a hard life, demanding and often lonely, but it was a life filled with purpose. "It has its quiet moments," he admitted, "and its busy ones too. You'll see both, I suppose." Over the next hour, Ethan guided Leela through the ranch, showing her the main barn, the stables, and the feeding areas for the cattle. She asked questions, eager to learn, and Ethan found himself enjoying her company. She was curious in a way that reminded him of someone who genuinely wanted to understand the world, not just observe it. There was no pretense in her voice, no judgment, only a desire to learn. When they reached the edge of the fields, Ethan paused, looking out over the rolling pastures. The morning sun glinted off the dew, creating a sparkling effect that made the grass look almost like a blanket of tiny diamonds. "This is where the cattle usually graze," he explained. "They wander freely most of the day, but I keep an eye on them to make sure none of them wander too far." Leela took a step closer, her eyes wide with wonder. "It's amazing," she whispered. "I never realized how much work goes into keeping a place like this running." Ethan smiled faintly. "It's a lot of work, but it's worth it. There's something about being responsible for this land, for these animals. It teaches you patience, attention, and care." As they walked back toward the barn, Leela paused, glancing at one of the horse stalls. "Can I help?" she asked suddenly. "Even just a little?" Ethan hesitated. He had worked with many people who wanted to help but didn't understand the work involved. Accidents could happen if someone wasn't careful, especially with animals. Still, there was something in Leela's expression that made him nod. "All right," he said. "Just watch carefully and I'll guide you. Don't try anything on your own yet." Her face lit up, and she followed him as he demonstrated how to feed the horses, explaining each step in detail. Leela listened intently, her movements careful and precise. Ethan couldn't help but notice how naturally she seemed to adjust to the tasks, even though she had no prior experience. There was a confidence there, tempered by caution, that made him feel a little less anxious about letting her participate. As the morning progressed, the sun climbed higher, warming the cool air. Ethan moved from task to task, with Leela following him closely, learning and occasionally laughing at her own mistakes. There was an ease in their interaction, a rhythm forming between them. For a moment it felt as if the ranch was just a small world of two people, separate from everything else. Yet beneath the calm, Ethan sensed something unusual. The air seemed thicker, heavier, as if the quiet was holding its breath. The wind had shifted slightly, rustling the leaves in a way that sounded almost like a whisper. He shook the feeling off, attributing it to his imagination. Still, he kept a watchful eye on the surroundings. There was no immediate danger, but ranch life often reminded him that the unexpected could appear at any moment. Leela seemed oblivious to his subtle tension. She moved with curiosity and energy, exploring each corner of the barn and fields, asking questions about the animals, the equipment, and the routines. "How do you know which cow needs attention first?" she asked at one point, peering into a pen. Ethan considered the question carefully. "Experience," he said finally. "You learn the signs, a cow that's restless, a horse that's uneasy, they all tell you something, you just have to know how to listen." She nodded thoughtfully. "I never thought animals could communicate that much without words," she said. "It's amazing." As the morning drew on, Ethan felt a strange mix of comfort and unease. He was used to the predictability of his days, yet Leela's presence had changed the rhythm of the ranch. There was a sense of possibility in the air, as if something was about to happen, something beyond the ordinary tasks and routines. He tried not to dwell on it, focusing instead on the work and teaching Leela the small skills she could manage safely. By late morning, the sun was high, and the warmth began to drain the chill from the air. Leela had grown more confident, moving from task to task with less hesitation. Ethan admired her determination but remained cautious. Ranch life could be unforgiving, and even a small mistake could lead to injury. He kept a careful watch, guiding her through each action and correcting gently when needed. At one point, Leela paused in front of a section of the barn where old equipment was stored. She seemed hesitant, her hand hovering over a tool. "Do you want me to try this?" she asked quietly. Ethan felt a flicker of concern. Some of the tools were old, heavy, and not easy to handle safely. But there was a spark in Leela's eyes, a determination he couldn't ignore. "All right," he said carefully, "but slow, steady, and listen to me. Don't rush anything." Leela nodded, taking a deep breath as she followed his instructions. Ethan watched her closely, heart quietly thudding. Something about the moment felt charged, as if the ordinary morning had shifted subtly into something else. The ranch, the animals, even the sunlight seemed to hold its breath with them. And then she paused, lifting the tool, her voice calm but deliberate. "Wait, I take it off," she said. Ethan froze, his hands suspended in midair as he tried to understand her meaning. It was a simple sentence, but there was a weight to it, a pause that made the world seem suddenly very different. For a long moment, neither of them moved. The barn was silent except for the soft breathing of the horses and the distant lowing of cattle. Ethan felt a tension in his chest, a mix of anticipation and concern. Whatever Leela meant, it was clear that this moment mattered. She looked at him, eyes steady. "Trust me," she added softly. Ethan nodded slowly, unsure what she would do next. Something had changed in the ordinary rhythm of the ranch morning, a shift that neither could have predicted. The stillness was heavy with possibility, and as the sunlight fell across the barn floor, both felt that the day, and perhaps their lives, were on the brink of transformation. Ethan's heart was still beating fast when he saw Leela carefully lower the tool. Her hands were steady, her movements deliberate, as if she had made a decision that required every ounce of her attention. The morning light glinted off her hair, making her seem almost untouchable, yet very real at the same time. Ethan took a slow step closer, unsure what she intended. There was a strange calmness about her now, a quiet confidence that contrasted sharply with the tension he felt inside. What do you mean?" Ethan asked cautiously. His voice was low, careful, as though speaking too loudly might disturb the delicate balance in the barn. Leela looked up at him, her eyes meeting his. "Just give me a moment," she said softly. "I need to take it off before I continue." She didn't explain further, but there was no hesitation in her tone, no doubt. It was as if she knew exactly what she was doing and trusted that Ethan would allow it. Ethan hesitated. Part of him wanted to stop her, to insist she leave the tool alone and follow his instructions precisely. But another part, the part that had spent years reading situations and people, felt that she was making the right choice. He couldn't explain why, but instinct told him to trust her. Slowly, he nodded. "All right," he said. "Take your time, I'll watch." Leela's hands moved with care, removing the strap that held the tool together. It was a simple action, yet it required precision. Ethan realized that she wasn't just removing a piece of equipment. She was preparing for something that could either go wrong or save the moment entirely. He felt a twinge of nervousness, but reminded himself to stay calm. The ranch had taught him patience, and now it demanded that he exercise it in a different way. As she worked, Ethan's mind wandered slightly, thinking about how unusual it was to have someone like Leela on the ranch. Most people who visited were tourists, curious about the animals or the scenery, but unprepared for real work. Leela was different. She wasn't just curious. She was observant, thoughtful, and careful. She listened, absorbed instructions, and then acted with her own judgment. It was a rare quality, one that Ethan respected more than he could say. Finally, Leela set the tool down carefully, her movements deliberate, and stepped back. She turned to Ethan with a small, reassuring smile. "Now it's ready," she said quietly. "Everything will be fine." Ethan felt a mixture of relief and admiration. There was something in her composure that made him believe her. He took a deep breath, trying to steady his nerves. "All right," he said. "Let's see it then." They worked together, side by side, moving slowly through the task at hand. Leela followed his guidance but also added her own observations, pointing out small details that Ethan might have missed. He found himself surprised by her attentiveness. She noticed the way the rope was fraying slightly, the angle of a support beam, and even the position of a loose nail. Each small observation helped them work more efficiently, more safely. As they continued, Ethan felt a strange sense of connection forming. He had worked with many people over the years, some family, some hired help, but few had shared this unspoken understanding of timing, caution, and respect for the animals and the land. Leela seemed to sense when to pause, when to act, and when to ask a question. It was a rhythm that felt natural, almost instinctive. The morning passed in a blur of careful movements and quiet conversation. They worked without rushing, yet each action brought them closer to completing the task. Ethan found himself enjoying her company more than he expected. Her presence was calming in a way he didn't realize he needed. There was laughter too, soft and easy, breaking through the tension that had filled the barn just moments before. At one point, a horse in the stall next to them snorted and shifted its weight. Leela froze for a second, her eyes on the animal. "It's nervous," she whispered. "I think we need to move slowly." Ethan nodded, impressed. Most people would have ignored the subtle signs or panicked. Leela simply observed, adjusted her movements, and continued without alarming the horse further. Her understanding of instinct, even in animals, was remarkable. By late morning, the sun had climbed high, warming the barn and casting golden light across the tools and hay. Sweat had begun to bead on Ethan's forehead, and he noticed the same on Leela's. She didn't complain, didn't slow down. She kept going with determination, careful to follow the instructions and maintain her own safety. It was exhausting work, yet she moved with a kind of quiet energy that kept the pace steady and productive. At one point, Ethan stepped back to examine their progress. The tool had been adjusted perfectly, thanks to Leela's careful intervention. He felt a surge of relief mixed with admiration. Without her quick thinking, the task might have taken much longer, or worse, something could have gone wrong. He looked at her, ready to express his gratitude, but she was already looking at him with a calm, confident expression. "You did well," he said finally, allowing a small smile to appear. "I wasn't sure at first, but you handled it perfectly." Leela's smile widened slightly. "Thank you," she replied. "I just tried to pay attention, that's all." Ethan chuckled softly. "Paying attention is more important than most people realize," he said. "Especially here, one small mistake can cause a lot of trouble." They continued their work, moving on to check the fences near the pasture. As they walked side by side, the wind rustled the leaves in the trees, and Ethan felt a strange sense of calm settle over him. The earlier tension seemed to fade, replaced by a quiet focus and mutual understanding. He realized that moments like these, shared with someone who truly understood the work, were rare. Leela glanced around the fields, taking in the beauty of the ranch. "It's different from what I expected," she said softly. "I thought it would be rough, difficult, maybe even lonely, but it's alive. Everything here feels connected." Ethan nodded. "It is," he said. "The land, the animals, the work, it all connects. You learn to respect it, and it respects you back. That's the reward." They reached a section of the fence that had been damaged in a recent storm. Ethan began showing Leela how to replace a broken post and tighten the wire. She listened closely, mimicking his movements and asking questions when necessary. The work required strength and patience, and Ethan was impressed by how easily she adapted. At one point, Leela paused and looked up at the sky. "The clouds are moving fast," she observed. "Do you think it's going to rain?" Ethan squinted at the sky. "Could be," he said. "Storms come quickly out here. We'll need to finish before it starts." Leela nodded, returning her focus to the task. Her ability to stay calm under pressure reminded Ethan of why he had trusted her earlier. She seemed aware of the potential for danger but wasn't afraid of it. Instead, she worked carefully and thoughtfully, prepared to adapt if necessary. As they completed the fence repair, a gust of wind blew through the barn, carrying the scent of earth and grass. The animals stirred, sensing the shift in the air. Ethan felt a strange mixture of pride and relief. The morning had started with uncertainty, but now, with Leela by his side, everything seemed manageable. He watched her as she adjusted the last piece of wire, her hands steady, her focus unwavering. There was a grace in her movements, a quiet determination that made him respect her even more. It wasn't just skill, it was awareness, patience, and presence. She had changed the rhythm of the morning, turning tension into accomplishment. Finally, they stepped back to survey their work. The fences were secure, the tools properly stored, and the animals calm. Ethan felt a sense of satisfaction he hadn't expected. He turned to Leela, ready to speak, but she beat him to it. "I think we did it," she said, her voice light but confident. "Everything is in order." Ethan nodded, a small smile forming on his face. "Yes," he said, "everything is in order, thanks to you." Leela shrugged slightly, smiling. "We worked together," she said. "I just followed your lead mostly." Ethan chuckled, shaking his head. "Mostly," he agreed, but inside he knew she had done more than follow his lead. She had made the right choice at the right moment, and that had made all the difference. As the sun climbed higher, casting warm light across the fields and barn, Ethan and Leela stood quietly, watching the animals graze and the wind move the grass in gentle waves. The morning had been ordinary in some ways, but extraordinary in others. Something had shifted between them, a mutual respect, a shared understanding, and the knowledge that small, careful actions could change everything. Neither spoke for a long moment, content to simply be in the calm after the morning's work. The ranch, alive with animals and sunlight, seemed to settle around them, as if acknowledging their effort and cooperation. Ethan felt a quiet pride, not just in the work they had accomplished, but in the presence of someone who had truly understood it with him. Leela finally spoke, her voice soft but thoughtful. "I've never done anything like this before," she said, "but I feel like I understand it now, not just the work but the feeling of being part of it." Ethan nodded, understanding completely. "That's what it's about," he said. "Being present, aware, and respectful. That's what the ranch teaches you, whether you want it to or not." As they walked back toward the barn, the warmth of the sun and the satisfaction of the morning's work hung over them. Ethan realized that this day, which had started with uncertainty and hesitation, had turned into a memory he would carry for a long time. And Leela, with her quiet strength and careful attention, had changed the morning, and perhaps him, more than either of them knew. The day had begun calmly, with the sun high in the sky and a gentle breeze moving across the pastures, but Ethan felt a subtle tension in the air. He couldn't quite put his finger on it, but the world seemed different somehow. Perhaps it was the way Leela moved through the tasks, so alert and precise, or maybe it was the quiet way the animals had grown calmer around her. Whatever it was, Ethan knew that the ordinary rhythm of the ranch had shifted. There was a sense of anticipation, almost like the land itself was waiting for something to happen. Leela, unaware of his thoughts, focused on the next task. They had finished repairing the fences, and now Ethan wanted to show her how to check the water troughs for the cattle. It was simple work, but it required care. Dirty or broken troughs could cause illness, and it was easy to overlook small problems if one wasn't paying attention. Leela followed his instructions closely, her hands steady as she lifted the covers, cleaned the troughs, and refilled them with fresh water. "You're very careful," Ethan remarked, watching her work. "Most people would rush through this and miss something." Leela looked up and smiled faintly. "I've learned it's better to take your time," she said. "Rushing only causes mistakes." Ethan nodded, impressed. It was one of the lessons the ranch had taught him long ago. Patience and attention were worth more than speed. He wondered if Leela understood that on a deeper level, beyond just following instructions. There was something about the way she moved, the way she observed the animals and the land, that suggested a quiet understanding of responsibility. As they worked, a sudden movement in the field caught Ethan's attention. A young calf had wandered too close to the edge of the pasture near a thin line of woods. The calf's legs wobbled slightly as it tried to turn back, and Ethan's heart skipped a beat. He realized immediately that if it continued, the animal could get stuck in a low ditch hidden by the tall grass. "Leela," he called, pointing toward the calf. "We need to guide it back before it goes too far." Leela's eyes followed his gesture. Without hesitation, she moved quickly but carefully toward the calf, speaking softly to calm it. "It's okay," she murmured, her voice gentle yet firm. The calf froze for a moment, then responded to her presence, stepping cautiously toward the safer part of the pasture. Ethan felt a surge of relief. Most visitors would panic or run after the calf recklessly, but Leela's calm approach worked perfectly. He stepped closer to help, and together they guided the animal back to the herd. "That was perfect," Ethan said once the calf was safe. "You handled that better than I could have expected." Leela shrugged lightly, a modest smile on her face. "I just tried to stay calm," she replied. "Animals notice fear. If you panic, they panic." Ethan nodded, realizing that she had learned one of the most important lessons on the ranch without even realizing it. There was a rhythm to life here, a balance between caution and confidence, and Leela seemed to understand it instinctively. After the excitement with the calf, they returned to the barn to put away the tools and check on the horses. The barn was warm now, filled with sunlight and the scent of hay. Ethan watched Leela carefully, noticing how she adjusted to the environment with ease. Even the animals seemed more comfortable around her, responding to her presence as if they recognized her as someone trustworthy. "You have a natural way with them," Ethan commented, leaning against a post. "Most people don't get that. They think animals are simple, but it's the connection that matters." Leela smiled softly. "I guess I've always believed that everything deserves respect," she said, "even the smallest creatures." Ethan considered her words. There was a wisdom in her tone that surprised him. He had spent years teaching people about the ranch, explaining the routines, the work, and the dangers, but few had ever seemed to grasp the deeper meaning behind it. Leela did, and it made him feel both admiration and a little unease. Admiration because she was capable, and unease because he sensed that something unexpected might be coming. As if to confirm his instincts, the wind picked up suddenly, rustling the roof of the barn and sending a faint chill through the air. Dark clouds were moving across the sky faster than he had noticed before, and Ethan's heart began to tighten. Storms could come quickly in this part of the country, and he knew the dangers they posed: slippery ground, frightened animals, and unexpected accidents. "Leela," he said, glancing toward her, "we might need to finish up quickly. A storm could be coming." She followed his gaze, her expression thoughtful. "I see the clouds," she said. "Let's make sure everything is secure." Together they moved swiftly but carefully, checking the animals, securing the gates, and making sure the tools and equipment were safely stored. The tension in the air grew as the wind picked up, causing the barn doors to rattle. Ethan's mind raced, planning each step and preparing for any emergency. He felt a strange sense of connection to Leela in this moment. She was calm, focused, and ready to adapt, and that steadiness gave him courage. As they finished securing the barn, a sudden noise startled them. One of the older horses neighed loudly and shifted its weight, knocking against the railing. Leela reacted immediately, stepping forward to calm it with a soft voice and steady hands. Ethan watched in awe as she managed the animal's fear without alarming the others. Her presence seemed to stabilize the chaos, and the tension in the barn eased slightly. "You're amazing with them," Ethan said quietly once the horse settled. "I've worked with horses for decades, and not many people can handle that calmly." Leela looked down, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "I just pay attention," she said. "That's all." Ethan smiled, realizing that her quiet words carried more truth than most people would understand. Attention, awareness, and careful observation were what kept the ranch running safely. And now, with a storm approaching, those qualities were more important than ever. They moved back outside to check the pasture one last time. The clouds had grown darker, and the wind carried the scent of rain. Ethan felt the first drops on his skin and knew they didn't have much time. He worked quickly, directing Leela to help secure the gates and move some of the smaller animals closer to shelter. Her hands were steady, her movements precise, and she followed his instructions without hesitation. As they worked, Ethan noticed a young calf wandering again, this time closer to a steep part of the pasture near the creek. He called out to Leela, but before he could react, she was already moving toward it. Her voice was calm and commanding, and the calf responded immediately, stepping back from the danger. Ethan's heart pounded. He realized that without her quick thinking, the situation could have escalated into something dangerous. He followed closely, assisting when necessary, but Leela's presence had prevented disaster. The storm was arriving fast, the wind whipping through the trees and rain beginning to pour in heavy drops. Finally, they managed to bring all the animals to safety. The barn doors were securely closed, the tools stored, and the pasture cleared of potential hazards. They stood side by side, soaked from the rain but relieved that nothing had gone wrong. Ethan looked at Leela with a mixture of gratitude and admiration. "You did more than follow instructions today," he said quietly. "You prevented accidents before they even happened." "That takes skill and awareness." Leela smiled faintly, shivering in the cold rain. "I just tried to do the right thing," she said softly. "I didn't want anything to go wrong." Ethan nodded, understanding completely. "Sometimes that's the hardest part," he said. "Knowing what the right thing is and acting on it before it's too late." The storm raged around them, but inside the barn there was a sense of calm. The animals were settled, the tools were safe, and the work was complete. Ethan and Leela stood together, catching their breath, sharing a quiet moment of accomplishment. The day had begun with ordinary tasks, but it had turned into something extraordinary, a test of awareness, trust, and quick thinking. Ethan realized that this moment would stay with him for a long time. He had worked with many people over the years, but few had demonstrated the combination of calm, focus, and courage that Leela had shown today. She had changed the morning, the day, and perhaps even him, with her presence and her choices. As the rain began to lighten, Ethan and Leela stepped outside to check the pasture one final time. The storm had passed, leaving the grass wet and glistening in the late afternoon sunlight. The animals were calm, grazing quietly, and the ranch seemed to have returned to its peaceful rhythm. Yet Ethan knew that nothing would ever feel quite the same again. The morning had changed something in both of them, a shared understanding of responsibility, the power of careful attention, and the impact of a single choice made at the right moment. Leela looked around, her face reflecting both exhaustion and satisfaction. "It's beautiful," she said softly. "Even after the storm, everything looks perfect." Ethan nodded, feeling the truth of her words. The ranch was more than land and animals. It was life, fragile and strong at the same time, and today they had both experienced that truth together. As they walked back toward the barn to dry off and rest, Ethan felt a quiet respect for Leela, a sense of admiration that went beyond words. She had proven herself not just capable, but aware, thoughtful, and courageous. And he realized that the bond formed through shared responsibility, trust, and calm action could be stronger than any obstacle life placed in their path. The rain had stopped, leaving the ranch glistening under the late afternoon sun. Puddles reflected the sky, and the smell of wet earth mixed with the faint scent of hay. Ethan and Leela walked slowly back toward the barn, their clothes damp but their spirits lighter after the storm. The animals had settled, the fences were intact, and for the first time all day the ranch seemed quiet, almost peaceful. Ethan felt a strange mix of relief and unease. The storm had tested them, but the tension lingered. There was a feeling deep in his chest that the day was not yet finished, that something unexpected was still waiting. He glanced at Leela, who seemed equally aware, though she didn't speak of it. Her eyes were bright, filled with a mixture of excitement and caution. "I think we handled the storm well," Ethan said finally, breaking the silence. "Most people would have panicked, but you stayed calm and focused. I don't think I could have managed it alone." Leela shrugged slightly, smiling faintly. "We did it together," she said. I just did what seemed right. Her voice was calm, but Ethan noticed the subtle intensity in her expression. She wasn't just talking about the storm. There was something more behind her words, a depth he didn't fully understand yet. They reached the barn and stepped inside, shaking off the remaining drops of rain. The warm, familiar smell of hay and wood welcomed them, a sharp contrast to the chill outside. Ethan began to store the remaining tools and check on the animals one last time. Leela moved beside him, attentive, her movements careful and deliberate. As they worked, Ethan noticed her pause, her gaze lingering on one of the larger horses in the stall. The horse nickered softly, and Leela's hand moved to rest gently on its neck. Ethan watched her, noticing the quiet strength in her touch. She wasn't just calming the animal, she was connecting with it, understanding it. The horse seemed to sense her calm and responded in kind, relaxing under her hand. "You have a gift with them," Ethan said quietly. "I've been around animals my whole life, and I've rarely seen anyone handle them like you do." Leela looked up, her eyes meeting his. "I think it's about listening," she said. "Not just hearing, but really listening. Animals, people, they all communicate if you pay attention." Ethan nodded, impressed by her insight. He had always believed in the same principle, but hearing it from her made it feel more real, more immediate. There was wisdom in her words, and he realized that she had a way of seeing the world that went beyond what most people noticed. As they continued their work, the barn doors suddenly rattled in the wind. Ethan frowned, glancing outside. The sky, though clearing in most places, had dark patches moving quickly, and the air carried a faint rumble of distant thunder. The storm wasn't completely over yet. "Looks like another wave might be coming," Ethan said, tension creeping back into his voice. "We should finish inside before it hits." Leela nodded, moving quickly but carefully to help secure the animals and double-check the equipment. She worked with focus and precision, anticipating what needed to be done before Ethan even spoke. It was remarkable to watch, and he felt a growing respect for her skill and awareness. Suddenly, a loud crash echoed from the far side of the barn. A large stack of feed sacks had toppled over, scattering across the floor. The noise startled the horses, who began to move nervously in their stalls. Ethan felt his heart race. He knew that if the animals panicked, it could quickly turn dangerous. "Stay calm," he called to Leela, his voice steady. "We need to move slowly." Leela didn't hesitate. She stepped forward, speaking softly to the horses, her hands outstretched in a calming gesture. Ethan moved beside her, helping to steady the animals. Step by step, they guided the horses back into place, restoring order in the barn. Once the animals were settled, Ethan exhaled slowly, feeling a mix of relief and admiration. "That could have gone badly," he said, "but you handled it perfectly." Leela's face showed a quiet satisfaction. "It was just paying attention," she said, "knowing what to do before things get out of hand." Ethan nodded, understanding. She had learned, or perhaps always known, one of the most important lessons on the ranch. Anticipation and careful observation could prevent disaster. Today, her choices had made all the difference. As the storm passed, the barn grew quieter, but a new tension lingered in the air. Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that something else was coming, something beyond the work and routine. He glanced at Leela, noticing the same sense of awareness in her posture and expression. It was as if both of them sensed a change approaching, though neither could say exactly what it would be. Then, without warning, a sudden shout echoed from the edge of the pasture. Ethan's heart skipped a beat. He and Leela rushed outside, moving through the wet grass toward the sound. There, near the far fence, a young calf had slipped on the muddy ground and fallen near a small ditch. Its legs were tangled and it struggled to rise. "Quick!" Ethan shouted. "We need to help it." Leela ran forward, her voice calm but firm. "It's okay, little one," she murmured. She knelt beside the calf, her hands steady as she worked to free its legs from the mud. Ethan joined her, guiding the animal gently, careful not to frighten it further. The calf struggled, slipping slightly as it tried to rise. Ethan's heart pounded. One wrong move could hurt it, or even them. But Leela stayed calm, speaking softly, adjusting her movements carefully. Together, they managed to lift the calf out of the ditch and set it safely back on solid ground. Ethan exhaled, his hands trembling slightly from the effort and the adrenaline. He looked at Leela, who was brushing mud from her hands, her face calm and composed despite the intensity of the moment. That was incredible," he said. "You kept your head the whole time. I don't know if I could have done it without you." Leela smiled faintly. "We did it together," she said. I just stayed focused, that's all. Ethan shook his head, amazed. It's more than that, he said. It's instinct, awareness, and courage. You have all three. For a moment they stood quietly, looking at the calm calf now grazing near its mother. The rain had stopped completely, and the sun broke through the clouds, casting a warm light over the pasture. Ethan felt a sense of awe. The day had begun with ordinary tasks, but it had turned into something extraordinary, a test of patience, awareness, and quick thinking. Leela glanced at him, her eyes reflecting both relief and satisfaction. I never imagined a day like this, she said softly. It's intense but rewarding. Ethan nodded, understanding completely. He had lived on this ranch his whole life and had experienced many storms, both literal and metaphorical, but today felt different. Today, they had faced the unexpected together, and in doing so, had formed a bond built on trust and respect. As they walked back toward the barn, the last rays of sunlight glinting off the wet grass, Ethan felt a sense of gratitude he hadn't anticipated. Leela had changed the rhythm of the day, turning potential chaos into calm, danger into safety. He realized that her presence had not only helped with the work, but had also shifted his perspective. Life on the ranch, he thought, was unpredictable, but with the right focus and care, even the most challenging moments could be managed. Inside the barn, they finally sat down for a brief rest. The animals were calm, the equipment secured, and the barn quiet once more. Ethan looked at Leela, noticing the way her expression softened as she relaxed. You've done more than I expected today, he said quietly. More than anyone could have. Leela shrugged lightly, smiling faintly. I just paid attention, she said again. That's all anyone can do. Ethan chuckled softly, shaking his head. It's never just that, he said. It's courage, awareness, and calm action. You have all of it. They sat in silence for a moment, letting the warmth of the barn and the calm after the storm settle around them. Ethan realized that this day, which had begun as an ordinary morning on the ranch, had become a turning point. Something had shifted between them, not just in their work but in their understanding of each other, of life, and of the fragile balance that governed both. Leela looked out the barn doors at the setting sun, her face thoughtful. It's amazing, she said softly. How quickly everything can change and how much a single choice matters. Ethan nodded slowly, understanding her meaning. The day had shown him the same truth. One choice, one moment of attention, one act of calm focus had prevented accidents, saved lives, and transformed the rhythm of their day. And in doing so, it had created a bond that neither of them could ignore. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky with shades of orange and pink, Ethan and Leela rose to their feet. They knew the day was far from ordinary, and that the lessons they had learned would stay with them forever. The ranch, the animals, the work, they were all part of a delicate balance, one that required care, awareness, and courage. And today they had both proven that they possessed it. The sun had finally disappeared behind the distant hills, leaving the ranch bathed in the soft glow of twilight. The air was cooler now, carrying the faint scent of wet earth from the earlier storm. Ethan stood near the barn doors, watching the last streaks of sunlight glint off the damp grass. His hands, still slightly rough from the day's work, rested on the wooden beam, and for the first time that evening he allowed himself to breathe fully. Beside him, Leela leaned lightly against the same beam, her hair damp and clinging to her face. She looked out across the pasture, where the animals had returned to their usual calm, grazing quietly in the fading light. Despite the exhaustion that marked her movements, there was a serenity in her expression, a quiet satisfaction that only came from knowing she had faced challenges and handled them well. Today was something else, Ethan said quietly, breaking the comfortable silence. His voice carried a mixture of wonder and exhaustion. I've lived here all my life, and I've seen storms, accidents, and challenges, but today felt different, somehow more important. Leela nodded, her eyes still on the horizon. It was intense, she admitted softly. But it wasn't just the storm, was it? It was everything, the animals, the tasks, the timing. I think it was about noticing the small things before they became problems. Ethan smiled faintly. Exactly, he said. That's the lesson the ranch teaches you, whether you want it to or not. Awareness, patience, responsibility, all in one day. He glanced at her, realizing that she had absorbed that lesson naturally, without struggle. For a long moment, neither spoke. The sky had darkened further, stars beginning to appear one by one, and the ranch seemed to hold its breath in the quiet of the evening. Ethan felt a deep sense of connection, not just to Leela, but to the land, the animals, and the rhythm of life on the ranch. It was a connection he had always known, but today it felt renewed, strengthened by shared experiences and mutual understanding. You know, Leela said finally, turning her gaze toward him, I never imagined that ranch life could teach so much. I thought it was just work, chores, and routine, but it's more than that, it's about life itself. Ethan nodded, feeling the truth of her words. It is, he said. It's not just the work you do, it's how you do it. How you respond to the unexpected, how you stay calm, how you care for the world around you. That's the real lesson. The night grew darker, and the first soft chirping of crickets began to fill the air. Ethan looked around the barn, at the animals resting peacefully, at the tools neatly stored, and at Leela standing beside him. He realized that the day had not only tested them, but had also revealed something important about responsibility, trust, and the value of paying attention to life as it unfolds. Leela, he said after a pause, I want you to know today you didn't just help with the work. You changed the course of the day, you made a difference. She smiled faintly, her eyes meeting his. I just did what felt right, she said softly. I didn't think about it as making a difference, I just acted. Ethan shook his head, amazed. It's more than that. You acted wisely, calmly, and with awareness. That's rare, that's remarkable. Leela's gaze dropped for a moment, then returned to the horizon. I've never had a day like this, she admitted. Everything was new, challenging, even scary at times. But I feel like I understand it now, not just the work, but the life here. The responsibility, the connection, it all makes sense. Ethan felt a warmth in his chest. He had spent decades on the ranch, teaching and guiding others, but few had ever grasped the deeper meaning so quickly, so intuitively. Leela had changed the rhythm of the day, transformed challenges into lessons, and left an impression that would stay with him for years. The sky darkened further, stars bright against the deep blue night. The wind had calmed, and the faint sounds of the ranch, distant cows lowing, the rustle of leaves, and the occasional snort of a horse, created a peaceful melody. Ethan took a deep breath, feeling the calm settle over him. He realized that the day had not only tested them, but had also bonded them in a quiet, unspoken way. Leela glanced at him, a small smile on her face. Do you think I could ever handle this on my own? She asked softly, almost as if testing herself. Ethan considered her question carefully. You've already shown that you can, he said. Today you faced challenges I've dealt with for years, and you did it with focus, patience, and awareness. You might not realize it, but you're capable of much more than you think. She nodded, her expression thoughtful. It's strange, she said. I came here expecting to observe, maybe learn a little, but I didn't expect to be tested like this, or to feel this connected to everything around me. Ethan smiled, understanding completely. That's the ranch, he said. It teaches you lessons in ways you don't expect. It shows you what responsibility feels like, how important awareness is, and how small actions can have big consequences. Today, you learned all of that. For a while, they stood in silence, letting the night settle around them. The animals were calm, the barn secure, and the ranch held a quiet serenity. Ethan felt a deep sense of satisfaction, knowing that the day's challenges had been met, that no harm had come to anyone or anything, and that lessons had been learned, not just by Leela, but by himself as well. You know, Leela said softly, breaking the quiet, I think this place, it changes you. Not just because of the work, but because of the responsibility, the attention, the care you have to give. You can't rush it and you can't ignore it. It teaches you patience, respect, and focus. Ethan nodded, impressed by her insight. Exactly, he said. It's not about what you do, but how you do it, and you did it well today, better than I could have imagined. Leela smiled, a faint blush on her cheeks. Thank you, she said softly. I feel proud, actually, and grateful for letting me be part of it, even if just for a day. Ethan felt a warmth he hadn't expected. He had always appreciated the rhythm of the ranch, the quiet lessons it offered, but now he realized that sharing those moments with someone who truly understood made them even more meaningful. You're welcome, he said simply. I'm glad you were here. Today wouldn't have been the same without you. The night deepened, and the first hints of a cool breeze rustled through the trees. The barn doors creaked slightly, the animals shifted in their stalls, and Ethan realized how much the day had transformed not just the ranch, but the people within it. He and Leela had faced the unexpected together, handled challenges calmly, and come out stronger for it. You know, Ethan said after a long pause, most people don't see the lessons here. They see work, chores, and routine. But today you saw something deeper. That's rare. Leela looked at him, her eyes thoughtful. I think I'll remember today for a long time, she said. Not just the work, but the feeling of responsibility and trust, and how quickly life can change if you're not paying attention. Ethan nodded slowly, understanding completely. The day had taught him the same lesson. One moment, one choice, one calm and careful action could change everything. And now he realized that lesson would stay with them both, shaping how they approached life and the challenges ahead. The stars shone brighter as darkness settled fully over the ranch. Ethan and Leela walked toward the main house together, their steps slow and unhurried. There was a quiet sense of completion, a satisfaction that comes after hard work, challenges faced, and lessons learned. The barn behind them was secure, the animals calm, and the ranch seemed to exhale in the calm of the evening. I think I understand now, Leela said softly, her voice almost lost in the quiet of the night. The ranch isn't just about work. It's about connection to the land, the animals, and the people around you. Today taught me that. Ethan smiled faintly, feeling a deep sense of agreement. Yes, he said, that's the most important lesson, and you didn't just learn it, you lived it. As they reached the main house, Ethan felt a quiet gratitude. The day had begun as an ordinary morning on the ranch, filled with routine and chores. But it had transformed into something extraordinary, a test of patience, focus, and courage. It had brought them together, created a bond built on trust, and taught lessons that would last a lifetime. Leela paused at the doorway, glancing back at the barn and the fields beyond. I'll never forget this day, she said softly. Everything changed today for me, for you, and maybe even for the ranch. Ethan nodded, a quiet smile on his face. Yes, he said, everything changed, and in the best way. Together they stepped inside, leaving the calm, moonlit ranch behind for the night. But the lessons, the trust, and the quiet strength they had discovered together would remain, shaping their lives and the bond they had formed. The ranch, alive with history, animals, and care, had shown them once again that life could change in a single moment, and that those moments, handled with awareness and courage, could make all the difference.